need like three
Uh-oh.
chairs, right over here. Up with all that. Coming
It's
in,
recording.
I don't want them to come in and walk. I want them to come in and stay. It must be Pathfinder. And you and your picture on the back have more honors than I've ever seen on anybody's section. I'm actually jealous. Is your Pathfinder Club planning to go to the Emporee? Okay, I'll see you there. So. And by any chance, all I have to do is click. Theoretically there, and then it works. All right. Well, like I said last week, I would have been willing to share with anybody, so, I spent more time this week reading more translations and more commentaries than you could think of. Lauren cheats. He sends you all the stuff you read, so you have to really work hard to find stuff he sends you. Did anybody read the 30 pages from Uriah Smith? No, John, I read it too. Word for word. It's actually not bad.
It's the best one.
It's not bad. And actually, when you read it and take a step back and you go, thinking that this person in the 1800s, not now,
In the history.
he knew history. I was really shocked.
Me too.
Okay, so before we get into Daniel 11 today, when somebody with a Bible, and I see somebody, I'm looking at it right now. Would you turn to Genesis 1:1 for me, please? Genesis 1:1. What does it say?
Let's just stop right there. Everybody hear what she said?
In the beginning.
In the beginning, God.
Now, somebody else. Hi, young man. Revelation 21. Revelation 21:4 to be exact. Come on in, we have chairs. It's okay. Don't be bashful, don't be shy. I do.
You will wipe away every tear from their eyes, death shall be no more, neither shall there be mourning, nor pain anymore, for the former things pass away.
Now, read, sorry, I should have mentioned this sooner than that. Read from the London.
Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw a holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, there as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is not man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God.
And then there will be no tears, crying, pain, sorrow, suffering. So Genesis 1 says, Revelation 21 says, after all the noise in the middle, there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. There's going to be no more pain, no more sorrow, no more suffering. Daniel 11 is an exposition of taking Daniel through the history of the earth to the end of time, and it actually finishes in chapter 12. So actually, if we'd have done this probably better, we'd have taken 10, 11, and 12, lumped them together and taught them one. Now, it may have taken 2 Sabbaths, but they really are one point of time. The Bible just happens to divide them up into 3 different chapters. And we're studying them in 3 different chapters. And the person who gets chapter 12 gets all the cool stuff at the end. What I get in the middle is a whole bunch of history that's about to take place after Daniel. That's very interesting. And you've had biblical scholars over the years try to take Daniel 11 and pinpoint times in history about what it all means. And you've had biblical scholars look at it and go, I'm not sure enough time has passed for us to really have the right information completely of what Daniel 11 means. So I read many translations of Daniel 11 this week. The one translation that is not a literal translation, it is a
Paraphrase.
It's a paraphrase, is from Blanco. And I love his paraphrase of Daniel 11 because he takes enough through history and embeds it into the biblical text. And then when it changes from history into spiritual things, it's pretty obvious when he makes that change, and it's pretty obvious what he's describing. Now, you can agree or disagree about his translation. So I just want everybody to understand right now, if there's 80 people here today and you read 4 translations of Daniel 11, I'm going to have 85 interpretations of history. Okay? And I will tell you this, those of you who know history well will do better in Daniel 11 than those of you who do not. What you all need to take into consideration is, you know how it begins and you know how it ends, and the middle's a little messy. So what we're going to do is I obviously brought some slides. So I asked Paula last night, should I read Daniel 11 again? She gave me this.
There's your answer.
And I'm like, yeah, I really, really like this translation. And she goes, I really, really don't care. So we're going to try to avoid doing that this morning. I'm going to assume that if you want to pick it up and read it, you've either done it or you will do it. If you haven't read it, you should. And if you haven't read this book, so the Clear Word Bible is a great translation if you haven't read that one. And if you haven't read Stepanovic's interpretation of Daniel 11, you should do that. To be honest with you, he's amazing. Unfortunately for you, if you start, he has 5 appendices to chapter 11, and you don't really get the complete picture from my perspective until you read at least the first 3. Okay, so a biblical, here's the deal. I got a biblical scholar, Daniel, who wrote the book, and it took him a fourth of the book to do Daniel 11. And I'm supposed to teach this in 45 minutes. I'm not bitter. Here we go. All right. So Daniel 10 to 12 form a single unit. Greg taught last week. In Greg's part, it was a vision. We move from vision to audition in 11. In other words, Daniel's not seeing a movie picture of the world unfold in front of him. He's actually being told, and he's writing down what he's being told. Understand the difference? Yeah. And so we move from vision to audition as we move into this transaction. And then Daniel 12, who teaches next week? Oh, he's here next week?
Yeah, Kelly and Stepanovic are gonna do Daniel 12.
Oh, fantastic. That'd be great. Okay, we should just let them do this too. So Daniel 12 is the cool part, and you'll understand why when we get to Daniel 12. So Daniel 11 is the longest and most detailed oracle in the book, and is considered one of the most difficult chapters in the Bible.
Uh-oh.
What did I do?
Nothing.
Good.
It asked me to update you through the software just before class. It wasn't gonna let me go without it.
There we go. Hey, Marcy, right up here. Right here in the front row. Good to see you. All right. So guys, its form is literal, is more literal than symbolic. So what I mean by that, you can trace a lot of history through Daniel 11 now that we live in this age. So This was sealed up to the end of time because enough time needed to pass for us to be able to look back at Daniel 11 and make sense of it. So if somebody was reading Daniel 11 the day he wrote it, they'd go, we don't know anything about this. It's only now, looking back through the course of history, that you can place Daniel 11 in any type of form or substance of what was going to take place in the world. The language is very condensed, and at times it's vague. And therein lies the problem. You're trying to put in a large chapter in the Bible, the history of the world to come, along with the spiritual problems that we're going to have at the end of time, all in one chapter from the mouth of God. For us to study in our modern day time, going back to when it was written. Yeah, it's great. All right. There's 3 ways to look at Daniel 11. If I was left to my own devices, I am not a history major. And I took bonehead history in college. So I want everybody to know I was a business computer science major in college. If it wasn't a part of my curriculum, I took the easiest classes I could possibly take and everything else. Okay? So, and I didn't take my generals until my senior year. And I remember walking into my bonehead freshman history class as a senior, and this guy going, no. You're not taking this. I said, yeah, I am actually. This is going to be great. So you can first consider the chapter too difficult and in despair, give up. The normal response to the one without reference or history. So if you think about this, folks, if you had no reference material, no commentaries, no write-ups, you weren't acquainted with history and you tried to read chapter 11 just as a newbie into the Bible, and you didn't have any reference material and didn't know where to go get that reference material, you would probably read Daniel 11 and go, yeah, let's kind of move on. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. Okay. Second way, follow the temptation of claiming that one can determine a precise meaning of every single detail appearing in the text. That's what Uriah Smith did. That's the reason you didn't bother to read the 30 pages. Because if you had have read the 30 pages, it is a discourse in history that is remarkable. Now, I don't know who helped Uriah Smith write that. Somebody, either that or he's just a historical scholar. But the detail of history that he leans into as it relates to passages, so he'll take one sentence out of the passage and write a whole page on it. And this king did this, and this king's wife did this, and the army did these things. And it's like a remarkable discourse of world history since Daniel's time. And that's the reason I found it to be interesting. Now, whether he's correct or not about some of it, people can argue about. Third way, follow a balanced approach. The meaning may vary in interpretation over time, meaning if the end of time hasn't come in 1,000 years and people are sitting in this Sabbath school class 1,000 years from now reading Daniel 11, Uriah Smith's interpretation of Daniel 11 is probably not correct. All right. Now, I'm not saying we're going to live another 1,000 years. So nobody walk out of here and call President Wilson and tell him that I don't think we're at the end of time. Okay. Because on Monday, I'm going to get a phone call. That's the way that'll work. Okay. But at the end of the day, we've been having ourselves worked into a fury as a people about how close the end of the time is and how worried we are about things at the end of time. And now I'm 60, and I remember this first meeting started when I was 7. And I don't know if I'm going to live to the end of time or not. And I don't know if my kids are.
Is there noise coming from someplace else?
Genesis
Where is it from?
1:1 says, in the beginning, God. Revelation 21, 1-4 says, in the end,
That's
God.
not it.
All right. So
Oh,
Stevanovic, basically, if you get into his sub chapters at the back, agrees more with Uriah Smith than he doesn't. So that would lead me to believe that Stevanovic does believe that we are in end time, whatever that means, right? So you think about a God who put this world into motion. Either you believe the whole rock and everything that was created in it started 6,000 years ago, or you believe the rock is old and God's creation on this earth is a different age than the rock. I don't care what you believe. That's up to you and God. Okay, at the end of the day, God was in the beginning, and at the end of the time, it's going to be God. So when you think about a God who's always been and always will be, what is a mere 6,000 years that we're thinking about on our Earth history as it relates to the human beings that we've created from the garden to now? Or if you believe that this rock is really, really old, who cares? Have you seen the new images of the old Hubble telescope versus the brand new telescope that they have up there now? The old Hubble telescope, remember when that came out? How cool those pictures were? They look like analog TV today compared to the new telescope, which looks like high-def TV that surrounds you almost. What they're able to pull in now and see of the universe is radically better than what it used to be. There's just a lot we don't know as human beings. So pick your poison. I'm not picking one for you. If you love bullet point number 2 and you're good with that in your own brain, God bless you. I'm not telling you you're wrong. There's probably a little bit of history still to play out, and we may not know everything. And so I tend to lean more towards bullet point 3 personally, but that doesn't mean you're wrong if you lean towards bullet point 2. So if you read Uriah Smith and you go, everything in here is right, and we're done with history, and this rock's going to be done in 20 years, God bless you. You guys with me? I'm not arguing that today. All right. We'll argue about other stuff. Okay. Daniel 1-4. So let's break it into, since I can't read it to you, but I'm not bitter. Let's break it out a little bit. So Daniel 11, 1-4 is the conflict between the East and the West. So let's just go through some history that everybody agrees about in Daniel 11. First of all, it says right in there, Gabriel was sent to strengthen Michael, which was strengthening Cyrus, which means there's a whole cosmic thing going on between good and evil we don't see all the time. And it intrigues me greatly when those types of things are in the Bible. So Cyrus takes over, Persians come to power. The fourth ruler of that kingdom was Xerxes. I've studied Xerxes in the Bible. Xerxes mounted a huge army and came to defeat who? The Greeks. Now there's a very violent movie about him trying to take his army through a pass called 300. If you don't have the stomach for it, don't watch it. But it's pretty remarkably accurate about how the Greeks kept Xerxes out of Greece as long as they possibly could with 300 people. All right. Who took over in Greece? We know world history. Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great took his army. He conquered everything, and he died young in a drunken debauchery. When he died, he left nothing, and his 4 generals split the world up at that time. Now look, this is the biblical world. This is not China. This is not South America. This is not America. This is biblical history world, okay? Which always bothers me. We got to do a Sabbath school lesson on that. What happened to China in the Bible? I don't know. It's not there. Okay. Okay. Somebody smarter than me is gonna have to get through this. Okay. These four kingdoms fought against one another for years. So listen, Daniel's Palestine is sandwiched between Egypt and Syria. Just look at the map. Two of Alexander's generals achieved all the power. They're broken up into four very quickly. Two of the four conquered the other two. There was two left. There was one in the north. He was based in in the south, based in Alexandria, Egypt. You've heard in history of the, how you say that word, Paul? Ptolemaic rulers. I said it wrong last night 6 times, and she finally told me I was wrong. Ptolemaic rulers, and you tell me much history I've had. King of the south, and then one ruled in Antioch, Syria, king of the north. Or you've heard of the Seleucid rulers in history, right? So those people, and then, so here we go. Daniel 11, 5-20. So Palestine was either being marched through or attacked by both the northern and southern kingdoms who were constantly waging war with one another. That's what Daniel 11, 5-20 is all about. Okay? Everybody wanting world supremacy, mounting an army, killing people, either winning or losing and going home. Every time they had to run through Palestine. So can you imagine being in Palestine and just sitting there with nothing and having these armies go back and forth through your country the whole time, making it really life difficult for you? It reminds me of what I see on the pictures today when I look up what's going on in Ukraine. Okay. I can tell you the armies of the north and the armies of the south would have cared less about the people in Palestine. I can tell you that when they were marching through, they would have taken what they wanted. They would have destroyed what they wanted. They would have done what they wanted. They would have left what they wanted. It couldn't have been a good time. All right. Alliances were formed by marriage or royalty between the two kingdoms, and even that didn't work. There was murder of the king of the south and his daughter. There was no lasting peace ever between the kingdoms of the north and the south. Pride and vengeance come with a high price and loss. So, what happened and who came to power after Greece broke up into the four kingdoms, with the two kingdoms fighting for a period of time? Who intervened into Palestine at that time? Who did Palestine send a note of help to in history? The Romans. The Romans were a small power rising in the west, and they were tired of being marched through. And Palestine got together and sent an emissary to Rome and said, "Can you please come help us?" Rome got into Palestine because they invited them in. We lose that part of history. I forgot that part of history until you read it. All right. So Daniel 11, 21-30 is basically the political activities of a contemptible person. So in history, which nation ruled the world after Greece? Rome. During Roman rule, were there many wars? I mean, if you read the story of Roman domination, they fought with everybody. If they weren't at war, they were not happy. If there was a piece of land that they didn't have, they wanted it. Anybody been to England and seen Hadrian's Wall? Okay, they went everywhere in the then known biblical world. Okay, political Rome's demise came in 476 AD. Who beat them? Anybody remember? All the kingdoms of the north, basically the Germanic tribes. Yeah, the hordes. That's what they called them, was the barbaric empire. But it was basically the Germans and the Huns, and the history is anyway. So 476 AD came in. Since 476 AD until today, tell me a time when there's not been a constant stream of wars among nations too numerous to count. So who rose to power in biblical times after Rome's demise? Europe took over. Let's just go through history. What happened over in the Syrian area? Who took over? Come on, guys. Ottoman Empire. Thank you, Ken. The Holy Roman Empire started then on the eastern, in Europe. France and England fought constantly for years. England and Scotland fought constantly for years until they finally came together and decided. The Vikings came in and fought constantly in Europe for years. The Ottoman Empire ruled the world from Constantinople. That's the biblical history that we've got here. And the reason I don't have page after page after page of it is because if you just go from the defeat of Rome, which by the way, during the Roman power, it was bloody. If you just look at God's history or our history from the Roman Empire to now, even through the 17, 18, 19, 2000s, there's been one war after another in this life. And that's basically what Daniel 11 is about. There will be no peace until the end of time. Okay? You may think you have peace for a time, and then there will be another war. So then we move into Daniel 11, 31 to 39. It goes from the literal to the spiritual. And it describes what took place basically in the Dark Ages. A power is going to rise that will speak unheard of things against God and will do as he pleases. He will be arrogant and hostile against God's people. He will use force and flattery to do whatever he wants to do. Ever heard of indulgences? That's flattery. Ever heard of flattening a country? That's force. Just go back in history. Leads people away from the priestly ministry of Jesus to himself as God's representative. Okay? Use of idolatrous ways of approaching God in worship becomes the guardian of the fortress, which means will happily use military power to enforce his way anytime he wants. Most likely an oppressive politico-religious system. So if you read Daniel 11, 31 to 39, you've moved from literal history into spiritual history, and there's not very much that matches that spiritual time period, except for the Dark Ages. Okay? Now, we move Daniel 11, 40 to 45, conflicts at the end. There's going to be a period, and this is what we teach as a people, of earthly supremacy by this religious power. That time has not come. Not yet. This is the time of Armageddon as described in Revelation 16. It's spiritual in nature, and it's going to involve the whole world. And chapter 12 picks it up and says, after that happens, let me tell you the cool things that take place. All right. So I remember as a kid thinking, I don't know when that's going to happen, but it wouldn't hurt my feelings if I died before he did. You know, when you think about your own life, especially the life we live, most of us here in this country, it's a pretty sweet deal. Okay. Now, I got a lot of countries where it's not a sweet deal right now. And those people would like to have the end of time come, probably in a way that we don't even fathom. But for us today, where we're at and how we're living our lives and the freedoms that we have in this country today, in spite of the polarization of the country right now and the hatred and the file that's spewed forth out of people's mouths, it's still a remarkably easy place to live from a world history perspective. I can take you to South America today and find you lots of places you don't want to live. If you don't believe me, go to Texas and look at the border of the people that have made their ways from South and Central America to our country to try to get in. I can take you to Europe today and find you places you don't want to live. Every time we teach this Sabbath school class, it will be the same. There will be wars, rumors of wars. There will be idiots running countries. There will be oppression. There will be bad things happen in our world at all times spread across the world. So what does Daniel 11 mean? So I'm going to give you some lessons and now I want to talk about it. Okay. I hope you're ready to talk. Number one, from heaven's perspective, just think about this. If you were God looking down, thank goodness none of us are God. But anyway, another subject. From heaven's perspective, most of Earth's history looks like an endless series of conflicts prompted by pride, arrogance, and greed. This cost the world precious God-given lives of tens of even hundreds of thousands of people over time. And it's doing the same today. When the conflict assumes a religious character, the target of a persecuting power becomes God's representatives on earth, God's truth and God's worship will be affected. Number 2, 3. Since modern day readers of Daniel already know the outcome of the end of time, I believe we're called to be brave and faithful in spite of constant adversities that come up in your life. And I can tell you the adversities that we have in our life are a lot better than what the Ukrainian people have in their life today. I used to have a home and a shell destroyed it. Now what do? We don't have any idea what that's like. This revelation was given to create an impression on the reader's mind about the length and extent of the long conflict on earth between good and evil. And unfortunately for you and I, we get to live our part as a part of that long conflict. Which gets me to the most important thing for me. Is sin your problem? Let's talk about that right now. Is sin your problem? It is not. You could have been born anywhere there was not sin. You were born here. When you got born here, there were years and years and years of historical sin built up before you ever hit the face of this earth. Sin is God's problem. That's the reason God took care of it. Most unhappy Christians, in my mind, have that confused. If I can only be good enough, if I can only do enough good, if I can only study the Bible enough, if I can only pray enough, I will be good enough to be in heaven. That is making you responsible for something that you are not responsible for. And the problem with human beings is we want to be responsible. When we look in the mirror, we have a choice of how it is we do our hair. When we go to the table, we have a choice of what we eat. When we go to the closet, we have a choice of what we wear. He doesn't. He wears what she says. Okay.
You look good.
Think about the hair tomorrow.
Choices. I'm sure there's hair somewhere there. The world gets a lot simpler when you understand that you were born into a place that you didn't create of your own. And it also gets simpler when you understand the conflict is really something beyond what you can see every day. And the conflict's not about you. The conflict's about what Christ is going to do. The conflict is sin going to be actually bad enough so that the rest of the universe allows it to be eradicated and God is love? Unfortunately for you and me, we have to live here with the heartache and pain. But we don't have to live with the heartache of not knowing we're saved. God sent everybody a robe. All you got to do is put it on. You can't go to the feast without the robe. If you go to the feast without the robe, you get kicked out of the feast. All you got to do is open the package and put on the robe. If you choose to be lost, it's because you didn't put on the robe. That's the only way you're going to be lost. Stop trying to solve God's problems. God is in control. That's the problem. All of us want to be in control. And we can barely run our own lives. And I'm speaking to me as much as I'm speaking to you. But this lesson was really good for me this week. It reminded me that I see a snapshot in history of where I live, how I do my life, and I ignore everything that happened before me, and I pretend I know what's going to come in the future. And we all do the same thing because it's our reality. And yet, when you think about God, whether this rock's going to go 6,000 years or 10,000 years, it's a blink of time. What he has to do is eradicate something that entered the universe that he has to stamp out once and forever. Sin is not your problem. Acceptance of salvation is your problem. You can't earn your way there. You didn't choose to be here. All you have to do is put on the robe of righteousness and walk out of here knowing God's taking you with him. Now, there's a lot of cool stuff that's coming at the end of time. I think it's going to be kind of cool. And it's going to test people that are there, and God bless them. And the truth is, if I'm alive, I'll go through it. And if I'm not alive, God bless my kids or my grandkids or my great-grandkids or my great-great-grandkids or whenever that is. That's not the point of how you're supposed to live your life or relate to Daniel. In the beginning, God. In the end, God. In between, it's messy and screwed up. It's greedy and it's power hungry. And lives don't matter to people. Lives matter to God. So what is history? Other than technological advances, what is history? It's a march of wars, victories, and wars. When you study a history class, that's all you study. So many dead, so many years, so little regret, so many fears. And who could sit in judgment over the victims of cruelty when their horror runs to hatred? Read it again. Who could sit in judgment over the victims of cruelty when their horror runs to hatred? Is it easy to keep the horror of wickedness from turning into a hatred of the wicked? I can tell you right now, it is not. Daniel's book teaches that a child of God can make a difference in the lives of other human beings. This fact should encourage all of us to live a life that glorifies God and serves others and lets everything else be God's problem. So, Daniel 11 in a nutshell. Now we have 12 minutes. Let's talk. Yes, sir.
Jesus says, as it was in the days of Noah.
So shall it be.
And how was it? It was like nothing was going on. They're marrying, giving in marriage, just like.
Going to work.
What's the big deal? So how do you fit that idea with all this war, constant, man, get us out of here?
So regardless of what's going on in the world, we do the same thing. We get up every morning and go to work, or we're retired. God bless you people who are. I want to join you one day. We live our lives. We grow our flowers. We go to church. We see our kids. Play with our grandkids. We buy stuff at the store. We go to weddings, we go to funerals, the older you get, the more of those you have. Nothing's any different. It really doesn't matter what's going on. They're doing the same thing right now in South America, and they're doing the same thing right now in Ukraine. People are in funerals, people are getting married, people are finding food, people are trying to recover their lives. We're built to live a life of meaning every day, regardless of the circumstance we're in. If we weren't, how could people actually make it through a World War II concentration camp? Talk about cruelty. You can't stop your life. Yes.
You know, from a 21st century perspective, when we're talking about the, you know, the North and South, there's so many applications. You should mention Ukraine. I mean, there is the king of, I mean, now we're talking 21st century, right? Here is the king of the and Ukraine is basically Palestine, you know, being forward, you know, and that's the core part about it. And that's what I also got from this whole review is that this is a roller coaster that really
Doesn't stop.
never ends, and it's exhausting, to be honest with you. And the other point that you also mentioned that I wanted to stress it is that don't look at the world just from the US point of view. We're so US centric. I am, everybody else.
That's where we live.
But if you were to live in Africa, then you're gonna see so many holocausts that are happening in the last 20 years. If you go to Ukraine today, you know, we're global. And so the times and the times and the times are not just what's happening here. So I think that's really an important point.
Anybody else? Yes.
I guess as you're explaining, and sin is not my problem, there was one thing that really stick with me. There are sometimes we tend to think that sin is our problem, and somehow we want to solve it. So sin is not my problem, but the sides I take, it is. If I either, and then I wrote to myself, like the sides and the military equipment and munition that the Bible gives us and talk about it. So that's, yes, it's my problem. So this is one thing, and this will determine my destiny, not the destiny of the world, because this is in God's hand, but my own destiny will be determined by the sides I pick.
It's your
And this-
choice.
Which is a choice. At the end of the day, it's a choice. It Is Finished is one of my favorite songs. I really love that sung by Gaither because that reminds me that it's finished. And we live our lives, I'm gonna talk about myself. I live my life nearly every day like it's not finished. Sometimes, like we approach our problems or our, you know, marital problems, your
You don't
whatever
have any of
problems.
those.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'll tell yourself. You just have-
Okay, this is not the place, okay? I'm way out of my league here.
Talk about it. Let's look at this as a spiritual battle. Because we tend to approach our problems as like, just like us problem, like temper and whatever, it's a spiritual. And at the end of the day, this also is weaved, it's not like country wars, or it's not, but it's a war that happens every day in our own personal lives. And the other song that I love is Jerusalem, sung by the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. And the tenor guy or baritone guy that sings there, because that reminds me that I don't want to live here. I really want to live in the New Jerusalem. But the choice I make every day will determine how to make it.
Yes.
I mean, I think what Daniel does, and like what you did here, we have a human tendency to define the world by just the things that are around us.
Yes.
And so if life is going good, we're marrying and giving in marriage if we're in Ukraine. And what Daniel does, it invites us and challenges us to take a cosmic look at life and to say good things and bad things and uncertainties exist in this world. And we are subject to them, and we have to have hope.
And you're not gonna understand everything. And you're gonna be mad sometimes at God. Well, maybe I'm the only person here that's ever been mad at God. It doesn't do me any good, but it still helps me feel better. And, you know, you get through that, but, it's a complicated process. But it's really not. Because you were born here to have a life. You have that life. Your part in the cosmic conflict is minuscule compared to what's really going on around you. That's the reason sin's not your problem, because sin is really not about you. You just happen to be here. Now, your response to God is the issue. And you're right, there's a whole lot of things going on that we don't know, can't see. And I hope that's what we're going to understand in the 1,000 years we get to spend in heaven. Is I'd like to really understand and see through the veil and understand. There's just so many things that I think we'll get to understand that we have no idea about.
And can I just say something about, you have to give it to Uriah Smith, which he just told me is the Seventh-day Adventist, he actually pretty her.
Yeah.
You have to give credit that he did take time. In
Oh,
those days, there was no computers or TikTok
No.
or anything else. So that's a lot of time for reading.
library.
And also books, and books also in the 800s, because you look at what he wrote, you know, the Ottoman Empire, I mean, he went all the way to 1860, right?
Yes.
And because I sort of like, well, yeah, we have to give it credit for studying, which I think is a really good lesson for us
Me too.
as well. Because it's easy to sort of blanket and say, Jesus, well, I get it, certificate, but it's so easy to do this. I think it's lazy. You know, I think you have to give it, because sometimes there are things happening now in the United States that if we look a little deeper and it takes a little tiny bit of time, like in today's sermon, while the guys are doing the drumming thing, you can think about that. Okay, and you can read Uriah Smith today in the sermon. Online.
So, any final thoughts? Yes, in this.
Well, it seems like there's this overarching question that has existed from the beginning of time. It's like, where's God? Does he care? Is he involved? Oh, by the way, there's this huge thing where God came as one of us. And how do we respond? We kill. And yet somehow that is the turning point that solves all of them. That's really a big historical
Event.
pivot. You know,
It's either the greatest story ever told or the biggest lie ever believed.
well, if your life's gonna be anything, I kind of pick the big story answer, you know.
Me too.
Yeah.
And by the way, I didn't mean to hurt anybody's feelings about what I just said, but when you really think about the faith you put in the cross, I mean, it's either the greatest story ever told or it's the biggest lie ever told. One of the two, you got to pick it. And we, I think, picked the greatest story ever told, or why bother being here? I mean, there's a lot of things you could do this morning that have nothing to do with the cross or the church. Yes.
When you became CEO, you came to cabinet one Friday morning and told a story about how you encountered a young man on an elevator at one of our hospitals who said, "So you're the CEO of this outfit? Tell me what this company is all about." And from that came our work on developing mission, vision, values, those kinds of things. But I thought about that for my own life. If I encountered somebody on an elevator who said, "So you're a Christian, tell me what Christianity is all about." Do I have a 4 or 5 floor elevator speech and I can explain this in a concise way that makes sense to somebody? There's a cosmic conflict known as between good and evil, between God and evil. He sent his son to resolve the conflict. If I believe that his son died for my sins, through faith, by his grace, then I have assurance of salvation. I've been working on my 4 floor elevator speech for a while. That's pretty much the gist of it.
Thank you, Warren. Yes.
As we've been going through this study of this chronology, I've been thinking that it's very easy to get into the woe is me mindset. That we have to deal with all of the trials and tribulations and the stresses and the angst of life because of what life throws at us. And all of the things that we're having to encounter as people as we're moving through this life. But it also dawned on me that there's a totally different way to look at this. We can look at this as God giving us a gift. That gift of life that says, I am giving you the gift to be my witness. I am giving you the gift to testify to others of the goodness that I am in your life. For me, that completely changes how I look at this story. Because it does not allow me to get mired down in my own stresses and to be so consumed with the evil that's going on around me. It allows me to rise above that and look at the gift that God has given me to have a this life to tell others of his witness.
Yes.
To me, the question is, what does this tell me about God? And to me, it tells me that 600 years before Christ, Daniel existed, and showing that God is solid. That God is in charge of all of history. And he chose to reveal that to his servant, and he will choose to reveal to me what I need to know at the time I need to know.
Thank you. All right, well, one thing about it, you can read Daniel 11 and look at all their commentaries all you like. And you got to come to your own conclusion. My conclusion is, I don't think Uriah Smith's too far off. And I think Jack Blanco did an amazingly good job of fitting into his biblical text, the historical accounts that everybody agrees with, and then moves on from there when you can't really nail it down. But it leads you to understand there's a lot to come that we don't understand. Will it come fast? I don't know. Will it come tomorrow? I don't know. All I know is this. Every day I have to get up and live my life because that's what we do. Otherwise you lay in bed all day. Okay? You get up every day and you live your life. And you have a choice as you live your life to believe that you're put here for some good for somebody else. Beyond that, beyond your sphere of influence, you're really now talking about God's problem and not yours. For me, living in my sphere of influence, doing what I can do to bring good to myself and the family and to others, is about what it is I believe God's called me to do. I believe a long time ago I put on the road. I don't believe that if I get mad at God this afternoon, and I'm still mad when I go to bed and I don't wake up in the morning, I still got the road. You guys understand? I have a relationship with God that allows me to have a conversation. It's not always perfect. And when you think about God as a passion, there's a lot of relief that comes. Because for me, I'm not perfect, never going to be perfect, and yet God still came and died for me. And he sent a special package with a special robe that fits my back, just like he sent you one to. Put it on, have a great life. You have no idea what's going to happen. In spite of all of it, God in the beginning, God in the end. That's right. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for your love. Thank you so much for your watch, care, and protection over us. I pray for the class, individually and collectively. Thank you so much for answering the prayers that we sent up to you about so many things. Bless Gary and his recovery. And I pray, Lord, that you be with us this week. Help us all find someone to share your love with and bring us back safely as we study again next week, chapter 12. We pray this in your name again. Have a great week, everybody.
I don't know.